Okay, so do we remember what the limit as x goes to 0 of sine x over x is? What's that limit? We talked about it today already. It's 1. It's that hole on the top of that graph. So that's 1. So we can just, for right now, we haven't proven that. It's basically from the graph and maybe the table, we've said, well, it looks like it's 1 to me. We'll call her good. Okay? You don't have to prove that right now. We may prove it in this chapter. But for right now, you can kind of take that as word and know that this is the thing. Okay? That's in your toolkit. You know that the limit as x goes to 0, sine x over x is always equal to 1. Okay? Remember, x has to be equal to or approaching 0 at that point. Well, it is here. So what we can do is we can look for other sine x over x's in problems. And this one has a sine squared on top. So if I separate them, we found ourselves a sine x over x. Okay, and one of the properties of limits is if I have the limit of this times this, that is equal to the limit as x goes to 0 of sine x over x times the limit of sine x as x goes to 0. So you can separate them and evaluate them individually and then just multiply it afterwards. Well, we just said that the limit of sine x over x as x goes to 0 is 1. What's the limit of sine x as x goes to 0? Did somebody say 0? It's 0. Sine of 0 is 0. So we get 1 times 0, so 0 is our answer. So search for sine x over x's. There's one in number 27. Maybe I'll roll into that one. Go back to 27 here. The limit as x goes to 0 of sine x over 2x squared minus x. Well, what can I do? How can I find a sine x over x? Good. Factor out an x from the bottom. And that's still the limit as x goes to 0. And then you could separate them. So limit of this as x goes to 0 is 1. X goes to 0 here, it's 1 over negative 1, so negative 1. So we get negative 1 for our answer. Sometimes they're more hidden than that. There's a couple, now that you understand to find sine x over x's, they're going to get a little harder. They're going to hide them. They're going to put them in trig identities, stuff like that. But remember, that's a skill to evaluate a limit by finding sine x over x's.